Let's see, is the mic working? Yes, it is. We have a lot of familiar faces tonight, but I have to ask my question. Who's here for the very first time? Welcome. How did you find out about us?
I attended the annual symposium last year, and I got your...
Fantastic. Well, that's great. Welcome. So the way to remember this event, third Tuesday of the odd month. That's the only time. That's the only way I can remember I'm supposed to be here. So, my name is Renee LaBelle. I'm the volunteer. I guess I've been hosting this since about 2010. We have an interesting program for you tonight, but I just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. We have we're going to collect your PDUs. If you signed in and put your number down, then that will be reported, and you should get an email on that. That's kind of a nice thing. We have a new administrative person. Her name is Kathy Lovelace. She started about a month and a half ago, and so she's taking care of doing the PDU remittals and all that kind of stuff. And you may have received a parking pass today. There was some kind of confusion on parking pass because usually you get orange or green, and today you got level 3, 4, 5, and it's like, what is that? So there is a new parking lot over here, and level 3, 4, and 5 on good days is orange, and that's what you all got, is an orange parking pass. If you have any problems with parking and you get a parking ticket, we'll fix that, because obviously parking up front here would have been the ideal thing instead of parking over there and trying to figure out how to get over here. I think that covers it. Oh yes, our sponsor tonight, of course, as always, is the project management program. On the exec ed side, we have the one-year project management graduate project management certificate. And you can get an MS in project management, or we also have the MBA, and it's regular 53 credit. Some MBAs are 36 credits and lower, but we got the killer one here. And I graduated from it in 2008, so I can vouch for that. Thanks. And we have a great speaker tonight, and this is a real treat because we usually don't have out-of-towners who fly down to do this. So Laura came from Minneapolis, and her business partner is right over here. Cindy, could you stand up? Cindy Rockwell. There's three ladies run Key Yacht, and Laura's sister and Cindy are the three partners. So it's a woman-led, women-owned, women-run business. And they have as you saw on the write-up, they have a project management focus. And I'm not going to rain on her parade, but I'm going to give you a little bit of background. Born in Iowa, based in Minneapolis. They started the Key Yacht in 2008. Minneapolis, yes. When I was there, you're supposed to say Minnie no place. But, sorry? Mini cold? Okay, well, we're doing 81 degrees today in Dallas, so it's we're knocking it out of the park. Laura wanted me to let you know she was married 4 years ago, and she's already a grandmother. That's pretty amazing, huh? So, that's project management, yeah.
I took the critical path.
Took a critical path, and you probably fast-tracked it a little bit, too. Schedule compression. And Laura and her husband are avid boaters. They have a large boat, and they go down the St. Croix River. And I think I pretty much covered it all. Thanks.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice, too. For those of you that I had a chance to meet, thank you for coming. Tonight I was asked to do a little bit of discussion on consulting as a profession. Is there anyone in here who consults as their profession? Okay, I think there were a couple people that maybe consulted and then converted to a full-time. David, right? I talked to David. Okay, well, yeah. I'm going to talk from my perspective. I entitled our presentation tonight, Consulting as a Profession, Insights from a Consulting Firm. So sometimes managing a project, if you get a little bit more insight about your business sponsor or your stakeholders, you can approach situations in different ways. So I thought if you're thinking about consulting as a career, I'll give you my perspective from somebody that would be hiring you. But before we start, and I'll kick into everything, I was curious why you came. So I would like to gather some expectations of what you'd like to get out of tonight. Yeah. Renee's going to be my...
Just a sec, Julia.
Hi. So my background is actually product and project management. I've been doing that for several years and looking to change. And I have several friends who do consulting. And so, yeah, I'm actually, as we talked about earlier, I'm actually in the process of applying for jobs and interviewing. And so this hit right nail on the head. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to say.
Okay, good. So you're really at the career exploration part.
Any other expectations over here? Okay, just a sec.
I think from my perspective, I mean, I did consulting for a bit, and like I said, I've just actually got hired on in January. They finally converted me after doing stuff for a couple and a half years. But what do you see the market doing going forward? Because it seems like there's more emphasis on contract consulting in a lot of companies because of the temporary nature of projects versus really having full staff and employees.
It's a really great point about the variable project mix in companies, and I will talk to that.
Vince, why did you come tonight?
My dad ran into the same problems that a lot of people do when they get in their 60s, which is they suddenly find themselves obsolete and without work. And he also, before leaving his last employer, figured out he was bringing in 85% of their income and receiving very, very, very little of it himself. He went a long time without making any money, but when he made his first sale of lab equipment, he made as much money in one sale as he typically did in 2.5 to 3 years. So I'm definitely interested in the idea of retiring but not retiring, and consulting seems like a good way to get there.
Thanks, Vince. Anyone else? Please.
Over here.
Yes.
I'm interested to know how you see the approach to launching young graduates into a consulting career. They don't have the years of experience and the voice of experience, and what is it that gives them the opportunity for success coming out of college?
Gosh, I have to give you your $5 later.
Thank you.
That's a great lead-in to one of our most favorite service offerings. Okay. I know it's kind of hard when you think about the word consultant. You think, what words come to mind? Expert. Expert, right? So how can a 22-year-old be an expert? Advisor. Yeah. But truthfully enough, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, what are 22-year-olds experts in right now? Technology, social media. You think about there are a lot of value. That's why companies want to bring as much youth into the business as those of us that have a little bit more gray hair or no gray hair. You're welcome. All right, any other expectations for tonight? Yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, because it gets recorded. That's the benefit of the mic. It's for the video recording.
So I want to know what you, if you're going to talk about what happens when you do get your consulting engagement inside the company and how you work the culture and get the buy-in.
Yeah, no, it's a great question.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Renee, I made you really get your exercise. That's fine. Okay. Now I turned it off.
We need a 22-year-old who's tech savvy.
I need do we have a 22-year-old? Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about is consulting for you. I would encourage all of you to get out of this what you want to get out of it. Feel free to ask any question. I have been a strategic facilitator most of my life. I'm not rattled. If I don't know it, I'll tell you. But I'd love to share my experience because I've been in this business for about 25 years and I love it. So happy to share what I know. And with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about my path to consulting. Most people that I've met that are in a consulting career didn't get there through a direct path. They didn't get out of college and say, I want to be a consultant. I'll share a little bit about my path, and I'd tell you that most of the people that I've met in consulting or that we work with are there because they embrace opportunity. And I would tell you that's the First place I would look is opportunity in the space that you work in right now. I'm going to talk about preparing yourself to consult and getting ready for the interview, getting ready, changing your resume, all the steps that you need to do to be prepared to consult. We'll talk about the rules of engagement. I'm going to talk about determining your value. When you sit down in an interview with a consulting firm and they may ask you, do you have an expectation of what you'd like to earn? I've had people turn around and say, well, I don't know, what do you think? What would you like to pay me? And then usually I'll close the conversation then and say, you're not ready. Because if you are ready to consult, you'll know precisely what's your value, what's that value, what are your skills worth in the marketplace, and you'll have an answer for that. And so I'll talk to you a little bit about how to discover that. And then planning for success. And I thought we'd do a little bit of sharing as a group on some of the obstacles and challenges that you might have and see if we could come up with some solutions together. I think I'm going to hit everything that we had on the list, but feel free. I'm Laura. Ask me a question. Happy to answer. So my journey, I started out as a buyer in a retail organization. I came out of school. I was the oldest of 3 kids. My dad was a CIO. He and I were as opposite on the spectrum of skills as you could possibly be. I was creative. He was organized and a programmer and a developer and very specific. I liked colored pencils. He liked them all the same, all lined up in a little row. When retail fell apart in the 80s and I lost my job, I went back to home and moved into my parents' basement. Dad said, get an IT degree. Go get a programming degree. You'll have job security forever. I was like, Dad, I'll hate it. I mean, programming, that's awful. I'm creative. I wear fashion. I don't want to wear a blue suit. I don't want to work at IBM. He said, no, trust me. Go get a programming degree. And I did, and got a job with a Blue Cross Blue Shield in Des Moines, Iowa, and started as a technical writer in an area that was implementing, oddly enough, an IBM package called DocuWise, and found out that I had a good skill, probably from the creativity, of being able to define what a business group wanted, and how to work with a technology group to translate those wants and desires into what we now know as requirements, and then help manage that project to completion. And I loved it. I loved the role of, back then we didn't know it was called a business analyst, but now we do. And that started a long career for me on the business analysis side of consulting. Shortly after that, I was recruited by Capgemini. Before the Capgemini purchased Ernst & Young or merged with Ernst & Young, and worked when Capgemini was bringing all of the management consulting philosophy and methodology from their European parent into the United States. And so that was my first exposure to project management methodology. Does anybody ever work for Capgemini? Their methodology was called Perform.
I worked for Accenture for almost 20 years, so
You know them, right. So their methodology was called Perform and was an early version. This was way pre-PMP. At Capgemini, after business analysis and then moved into some project management positions, it was very early in the PMO where project management offices were just starting to pop up in various companies as more and more projects were being handled with project management, and they were trying to put some governance around where is this project spend, how do we manage it. We're spending a lot of dollars on project management, which was new for a lot of, especially in the insurance company, which in Des Moines, Iowa, primarily an insurance town. So for insurance companies to have a full-time practitioner that just focused on project management was a new concept, and they wanted to wrap their mind and their dollars, try to understand how are we spending it. So that's really where PMO started up in the insurance space. So after project management, we had enough project managers out on billing assignments at Capgemini that we needed to manage our quality, and they established a position called delivery manager, which was kind of a quality audit position, and I moved into that position for a year, where we did a lot of project manager training, best practice. We did audits. We were a ISO 9001 certified firm, so we had a lot of audit work against our methodology. And then I moved into a principal consultant, which was 1 foot in consulting and 1 foot in sales, where you were defining a solution, helping to sell and close the solution. And that really launched what has now been the rest of my career, which is helping clients define solutions and then building a team to help implement that solution. Shortly after that, are any of you familiar with a firm called Genesis 10? Genesis 10 was a firm owned by a gentleman out in New York, and he was looking to expand. He'd spent a good portion of his career in technology consulting and was looking to expand his business across the US and interested in doing something outside of technology. So we joined to build a project management practice. We started it in Des Moines and then rolled it out to the Midwest, including Minneapolis, which is how I ended up in Minneapolis. And then after the delivery manager role, which was our version of the principal consultant, 1 foot in delivery, 1 foot in sales, I became part of a SWAT team, if you will, going into new markets to open up new offices for Genesis 10. And after about the 5th new office, decided, I think I'd rather do this for myself. And went back to Minnesota and joined together with 2 of my best girlfriends and started Kiat. About 10 minutes later, the economy fell apart in July of 2008, and we sat around thinking, oh my word, what have we just done? And so then we had an exercise for the next 2 years in perseverance and closed our first really large deal with Wells Fargo, which has been a longtime client of ours. And we sit now, we'll hit $20 million this year of revenue, which is pretty big for a boutique company. We have about 104 consultants. Well, actually, we have precisely 104 consultants in Minneapolis and in Iowa. And the reason we're here is that we were invited by one of our best clients into Dallas and Fort Worth. And so we are down exploring the Dallas-Fort Worth market to expand our business. So for those of you that are exploring consulting as a career, we would dearly love to talk to you. And as after our presentation is over, if you have insight from your company, your industry, there's so much about the Dallas-Fort Worth market that we don't know that I would love to connect with you and either buy you a cup of coffee or have a phone call and pick your brain. So with that, that's kind of how I got here. Any questions? Okay. So different roles I played, and this is part of my comment earlier about opportunity. To look at a career in consulting, I think you have to be open to opportunity. You have to be one of those people when someone says, we have this project to do, that you're willing to raise your hand and say, I'll do it, I'll give it a shot. I may not know the specifics of that project, or I might not know that industry, I might not know that software tool, but I'm confident that I can get it done, I can figure it out, I can leverage my network, I can do some research. I'm confident, therefore I want to take advantage of that opportunity. One of my early mentors in consulting told me to think about my career as every project I did would give me a piece of experience, and I should think about that experience as a pearl. And over the course of my career, I would end up with a pearl necklace. And I didn't even think about Dan's advice to me until this morning when I was getting ready, and I thought, oh, perfect. I wore my pearls. So some of the roles that I played, program management, project management. I've been in retail space, I've been in the insurance sector, I've been in brokerage, mortgage banking. So much of our work in the last 10 or 15 years has been compliance related. After the financial meltdown, with a lot of healthcare reform, they have kept a lot of consulting firms very busy. Projects that I've led, but most importantly, the skills that I became known for. So my personal brand, and I'll talk a little bit about developing your personal brand. Mine became about team development, change management, getting things done, working inside of an organization, delivering tough messages, growing young people. But at the end of the day, what people will say about Laura is that give her anything, she'll get it done. And that was a really great skill for a consultant to have. because even if I didn't know anything about mortgage banking, which I didn't, or about healthcare reform, which I didn't, I could dive in and have the confidence that somebody could fill me in, and I could figure it out. So July 1, 2008, we launched Kiat. That was our first brand. We actually paid a college student $150 to come up with our logo because we didn't have any money. In January, we rebranded, and we launched our newest program called Crew 212, which is the reason why we're at the University of Texas. That is our program. We hire college graduates. We have a very specific set of skills or a profile that we recruit to, and we bring them into a boot camp for 2 weeks, teach them some of the skills and the art of consulting, and then we'll put them to work for one of our clients as a junior resource, either a junior BA or a project controller. You guys familiar with project controller, project admin? I don't know what you call them here, but kind of the administrative assistant to a project manager. We'll put them to work there. We've just also developed a junior data analyst role, and then they'll work under the mentorship of one of our senior people until their first year engagement is over. And if we've done our job well, then our client will offer them a job and they'll convert to a full-time employee. And we look at this as a big give back. You know, Kiat has a mission to give back to the community that has helped us succeed. This is kind of helping young people find their way into project-related roles, which we happen to think are the greatest way in a company to get into a leadership position. Because if you really can understand how work gets done in a company, I think you can move anywhere. I mean, you can start in IT and end up in marketing, or go from sales to customer service. So we believe that helping companies find talented young people and getting them into these roles is a great way to find our future leaders, to find their path, and to find those of us that are at the other end of our career to find a way out and feel like we left it in good hands. So types of consulting firms. There's management consulting. We mentioned Accenture, Ernst & Young, Price Waterhouse. There's industry or specialty consulting. There's firms that maybe they're an SAP firm or SaaS, or they're a business intelligence firm. They're wrapped around a piece of software. Maybe it's an Oracle consulting firm, or they're focused on a particular slice, like data analytics or business intelligence. There's business process outsourcing firms, Tata. Other firms, excuse me? Yeah, so firms that maybe have, I knew the new hot place right now is to have business process outsourcing in Ireland, which I thought was kind of perfect given today's St. Patty's. And then there's information technology consulting firm, which is really where usually when Kiat is grouped, we're grouped into that information technology consulting, even though a good portion of what we do is outside of IT and in the business. But it's typically where we're classified. So a little bit about, in each of these sections, who's the buyer. In management consulting, typically the sell is done at the C-level. Senior vice president in a large company, it's typically somebody who has buying authority at a significant level. These projects are usually multi-million-dollar projects. Skills that you need are typically very business-focused strategy, the ability to sell solutions, persuade a group. You're selling a $5 or $6 or $10 million project. You need a significant ability to have a conversation at a C-level. Problem solve on your feet. Your solutions come from research, analytics. Typically, we call them the big six, even though I think there's really only 4 left anymore. But they typically have large research organizations that are doing research, working with groups like Gartner to pull solutions together. Big names, McKinsey, Bain, Boston Consulting, Deloitte. A sample idea of why you'd use a firm like this might be, why is profitability falling in one particular division? And they may look at that, bring a big study in. A lot of times that's when companies will bring a large firm like that, bring a partner and a team of typically younger people, to your point about young people in consulting. A lot of times that's how young people learn, is underneath the tutelage of a partner on a big project like that. In technology consulting, Typically, the sell is at the CTO or CIO level. Skills are typically business sense, math. A lot of times you see engineering. Process might be infrastructure or networking. Solutions are coming from technology implementations, problem-solving insights. You might hear this from IBM Global Services. There's big Oracle firms. Sample case, how can the sales force of a company create a centralized, up-to-date record? Might hear it, source of truth, consolidated data centers, etc. And then business and technology staffing firms. The buyer's typically a PMO lead, director, maybe a VP, depending on the size. And skills that you need are really what all of us do. Program management, project management, business analysis. Could be programming, QA. Solutions come from collaborating with clients. Big names, I of course had to put us first, even though we're a little fish in a big pond. But you may see Genesis 10, Modus, Apex, other firms like that. Sample case, manage this package implementation project to completion within budget. It's typically a start and a stop. So different types of consultants. You may be an expert in a vertical or a discipline. So if your expertise is data analysis or business architect, that would be an example of a vertical. Perhaps you are an SAP consultant or an Oracle consultant, so everything that you do has to do with that particular vertical. You might be a career path consultant who started out of college. That would be hired by Accenture or Ernst & Young, where you're in a year-long training program. You're under the tutelage of a partner. It's a career, it's a salary. It's the company that you call home and you work on, typically on an airplane, working for clients across the globe. It's kind of an exciting jet-setting career. And then there's what I call the independent consultant, who has chosen consulting as their profession. And that's really where Kiat lives. That's the space that we work in. That would be when you sell yourself as a consultant that your expertise is project management or program management or business analysis. And what you want out of your profession is to be the project manager on project A, and then when it's over, go do project B. And then when it's over, go do project C. And whether that's at the same company or a different company, same or different industry, that doesn't matter as much as the excitement of the work or the variety, the fact that it's a new problem. That's typically where, what draws the independent consultant. Does that make sense? So rules of engagement, things you need to think about, questions you need to ask when you're looking at your, at a consulting role, is the length of the engagement, expectations of the role. Are you expected to lead something? Are you managing? Are you part of a team? Are you going to head up a team? Are you delivering bad news? Sometimes companies will use a consultant to come in and deliver bad news so that when the news is delivered, they can leave and the team that's left doesn't have that baggage to deal with. Sometimes that's a very effective change strategy. It'd be good to know that so that you can reconcile that in your mind and make sure that you understand what that might mean to you in your work assignment. Rate fit. In our world, companies have rate structures, rate cards, rate agreements, volume discounts. Is what you want to earn going to fit with the expected rate the company wants to pay? Relationship of the firm with the client. I would tell you that this is really, really important. If you are considering a career or a profession in consulting, find out the firm that you're going to work with or through, whether you're going to be a salaried consultant or whether you're going to be an independent, meaning you're going to work for Kiat this week and next week you're going to go to Apex. Next year you're going to go to Apex and then maybe come back to Kiat and then work with a different firm. Understand how good the relationship is that that firm has with their clients. Because when things go bad on a project, it's always good to know, are you going to have somebody standing behind you or running away? So I would tell you that's really important. Consultants can get burned if you don't have a firm that will protect its own people. The client culture. We're going to talk about this a little bit later, but the perception of consultants. My dad, who I was telling somebody about earlier, was a CIO for a mutual fund company, Principal Financial Group in the Midwest. And he ran their mutual fund group. His perception of consultants had something to do with blood-sucking vampires. He was a necessary evil. He had to bring them in. And then all 3 of his children went into consulting as a career, which we all tell him is poetic justice for having that opinion. But it's important to know what perception does the client you're looking at, what perception do they have of consultants? Because you're going to find out how you'll be treated or how you're going to approach particular situations. It's important to know. Is there an opportunity for extension? Clients typically now like to buy in 3-month chunks. So sometimes it's a little bit challenging for someone to say, I want to go into consulting. This really great assignment. It's 3 months long. I'm going to quit this great job I have and move to consulting for a 3-month commitment. Sometimes that's a challenge for a lot of people to make that decision. But anymore, if you think about how your company buys consulting dollars, people typically don't commit $5 or $6 million at a time. They'll commit $150,000 or $200,000. And a lot of the time, because the people that we're working with, the PMO lead or a director, they may only have a signing authority for $150,000. So that might be their way of buying in chunks that keep them out of the administrivia of driving bigger deals. So find that out. Tenure limits, tenure-based rate discounts. This is many, many years ago when Microsoft was sued for, I don't know, some obnoxious amount of money by 2 independent consultants. Do you guys remember this? 2 independent consultants sued Microsoft. They'd been working for Microsoft for, I don't know, 9 or 10 years as a direct consultant. So they billed Microsoft. Microsoft paid them an hourly fee. They weren't an employee. They were what's referred to as a 1099. And they sued Microsoft for back benefits because in every other way, shape, and form, Microsoft treated them like an employee. They had employee privileges. They had everything except their payroll taxes weren't covered. They didn't have access to benefits. They didn't have the 401k. And they sued and they won. You remember that?
But they're employees.
Right. They were really, in all intents and purposes, they were employees. So how companies dealt with that was the rule says, the law says, after a certain amount of time of a consultant billing for a company, if certain criteria are in place, you have to view them as a consultant and as an employee, and offer them the associated employee benefits. And so companies started putting rules in place that would say you can only bill here for 11 months and 30 days, or only 18 months. And after 18 months, you have to be gone for 6 months before you can come back. There are companies that have tenure limitations of 9 months or a year. So good question to ask. If the company that you're being recruited to do a consulting engagement for is going to have a tenure of 12 months or 18 months, what happens when that assignment's over? Will that company be looking for your next opportunity? What's your remarketing? Because now you have a sales engine that sells you as a project manager. And then opportunity for conversion. There were a couple people in here who started at their current company as a consultant and then converted to full-time. A lot of times the clients that we're working with will use our services as a support to their recruiting engine, and ask us for a consultant that they then can offer a job. And it's a great way to use, especially if you're bridging from maybe you were laid off or your company downsized, or you're looking to switch to a new organization. Doing it's typically in our business is called a contract for hire, that you go into the opportunity and it's kind of a try before you buy. You get to date for 6 months, and then if you like each other, you can convert and make it a full-time employee situation. We do a lot of those. So, any questions? How am I doing with the microphone? What? Oh yeah, sorry.
Your
Thanks.
You mentioned the Crew 212 program. You make a significant investment in these folks. All right. And then you let them go to work for another company,
Yep,
maybe even the competition.
could be.
How do you protect your investment? How do you get full return on that investment? We had something like that. I'm retired from EDS, and we did that with young people too. They worked on an account for a year. They went to what we call the SED school for about 6 or 8 weeks. And they had to sign an agreement that they couldn't leave,
Yeah.
for a certain amount of period because we were losing them to the competition.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how you guys handle that.
It happens once in a while that we lose one to the competition, but we take a different viewpoint on this. First of all, someone who's 22 years old isn't of huge value to us and in our senior consulting practice because they haven't done anything yet. They don't know anything yet. They don't have, all the bumps and bruises that you have through your career where you fall on your fanny and you realize that you're not perfect. You don't have the best ideas. You learn all those lessons. That's what makes us good. It's the gray hair that I think makes us good. It's the learnings. What we want when we launch those young people into career, we want them back in 5 years. And we tell them that. Go out and work for our client. The average stay at a client now is between 3 and 5 years. So they're going to change jobs. How many times? I think I've changed jobs 6 times in the course of my career. The young people coming out of school now are expected to change their jobs 15 to 18 times. So if we launch them and they get some experience inside one of our clients, and we've introduced it, and for 5 or 6 years that client gets to capture all that youthful energy and vigor and really the perspective of the next generation of consumers, then we'd like them back. And then they've got some bumps and bruises. They have some experience. That we can work with. We're very good to our people. So it's rare that we lose someone to the competition. We have a very good reputation among our consultants. And then, if they find a great fit and we've done a good job and they go into our client and take a job as a manager, they also could become a buyer. So then we have someone in the account who came through us, knows what our program is, understands what our quality commitment is. They could become a great buyer down the road. It's an awesome question. Anything else? So preparing yourself. Determining if you'll like consulting. A lot of people will say that consultants have the attention span of a gnat. That people who like project work like it because you have a problem, you attack it, it's over, you go attack the next problem, and you go attack the next problem. So if you are somebody who enjoys building a team and managing a team and growing an operational group around a team or growing a service, then the kind of consulting we do probably isn't for you. If you like to manage a project start to finish, and when you're done, get assigned to the next big hairy project, and then go to the next big hairy project, then the kind of consulting we do would be something you might enjoy. Very important to convert your resume. Most full-time people on their resume will show the progression of their career. I started as an analyst, then I became an analyst 2, then I became a senior analyst 1, and then I became a manager 1, and then I became a manager 2, and then I became a VP, and then a junior VP, and then an EVP, all the way up. In consulting, that's meaningless. In consulting, what you need to do is look at your resume, and what I say is projectize your resume. I was a project manager, and here were the projects I managed. I implemented a software project, $5 million, 8 people on my team, 18-month completion, met project goals, duration, and budget. And then do your next project. And maybe at the bottom, I managed a team of 5. And then go to your next role. I managed a $7 million project, project members in 5 states, international team members. Here was the ultimate project goal. Here's what we met. Here was the outcome. So when you can take your resume and turn it into, here's what I did, here was the challenge, here was my team, the dollars, and here was the outcome, that is very meaningful to a consulting firm. because then they know they can look at your experience and say, this role, and this role will be very relevant to my client, instead of trying to translate the progression of a career in a full-time corporate America. Does that make sense? So first most important thing to do. Determining your value. Understanding what your skill set is worth in your market, in your skill set. You can do that with asking around. Next slide, I'm going to tell you how to convert your salary into an hourly rate so you can get an idea of where you sit. Determining your rate range. In our sort of consulting, most of the people that we work with are paid hourly. They're paid, half of our people are employees of Kiat, and half of our people are independent contractors. And for the most part, we really don't care. It's whatever works for that individual. A lot of times it's a second income. They don't need benefits. They'd rather run it as a business and get a tax advantage out of having their own company. That's fine for us, unless the client dictates. Back to those rules about Microsoft. There's several companies that came up with a rule that said we will only work with people who are employees of their firm. So another rule of engagement you have to just check with if being an independent contractor is important to you. Identify your target locations. I live in Minneapolis. I live on the St. Paul side of Minneapolis. If there's a client on the Lake Minnetonka, remember Purple Rain with Prince? That's where the movie, it wasn't actually filmed there, but that's what it was about, was Lake Minnetonka. That's an hour-and-a-half commute for me. So if I was talking to somebody who had a client on the west side of Lake Minnetonka, I would say I'm not willing to go that far. So know when you get into a consulting role, you're not going to the same place every day. Know how far you're willing to drive. We have people who will say, I'll work anywhere as long as it's on the bus route, so I can use public transportation. Clarify what flexibility means to you. Most people get into consulting because they're looking for flexibility. They're either looking to work, and whoever mentioned the consulting in retirement, people will say, you know what, I want to work January through June. I want to golf through the summer, and then I want a project to take me up until Christmas, and then I'm going to go to Florida for a month. Doesn't always work that cleanly, but it is a great strategy for, I don't want to work full time, but I'm willing to work 6 months of the year, and I love doing projects. And it's a great way, companies love that, because you bring the expertise of a career of 40 years to bear for 6 or 9 months on a project, and then take 6 months off. So, but it's important to understand what flexibility means to you. Is it, I want to work. We have people that have come back, men and women who stayed home to raise their children, and then came back and said, I want parents' hours. I want to come in, I want to work from 10 until 3 o'clock. And we actually have clients who love that flexibility because it's a half-time impact to their budget and typically get pretty close to a full-time work product. Research the firms that you want to work for or through. If you consider this as a career, I'd encourage you to pick about 3 to 4 companies to be your sales arm. Any more than that, they start to cross over each other, and then you have 2 companies representing you for the same opportunity at one client. And when that happens, the client takes your resume, crumples it up in a ball, and throws it in the trash. So make sure that you clarify which firms you're working through and who has, your permission to submit you for an opportunity. Establish relationships with those companies. Decide if you want to be an employee or you want to be an independent contractor. There's implications on both sides. And then start networking. Get out and start talking to people. Get referrals to great consulting firms. Talk to people inside your own company or people that you know in other companies of who they like to work with and who are good consultants, and start networking. Call me. That's supposed to be funny. Okay, so people who enjoy consulting, they like on working on something new. They like to do the work, not manage others who do the work. It's role focused, not title focused. We do a lot of work with Wells Fargo. That's the mortgage business is based out of Minneapolis. And in Wells Fargo, they talk about how far their role is on the org chart, how many steps down it is from the CEO. So people will introduce themselves. I'm Laura Kelly, I'm a 3 down. I'm a 6 down. I'm going to try for a new job, it's a 4 down. And that's the lexicon of the company. When you're in consulting, you really don't care where you are. Here's the role I want, here's the job I want, and you might want to know that you're reporting to somebody who's a 2 down, because that's going to give you an idea what their signing authority is. You like project-based work. You like solving problems or filling a gap. You like to design and implement solutions. You like meeting with new people, new teams, new companies, new challenges. You're comfortable in an environment where you don't know all the pieces and parts of the work that you're going to do. And you like not managing people or performance reviews, building a team, and you're okay with that role. What clients are looking for, so how many of you hire consultants? Okay, so see if I'm wrong on this. You're looking for a professional practitioner who doesn't need their hand held. You're looking for someone that will leave the team little better off than when they got there. You're looking for fiscal responsibility, somebody who will spend your project dollars wisely, that'll make the tough decisions, who will come to you and say, you know what, I don't think this is the right decision for you, and truthfully, I don't think you need me. Those sorts of professional courage are what earn you great reputation and get invited back. Best practices and a willingness to challenge status quo and then turn around and accept it when it's necessary. As a consultant, you always have to be okay with implementing a solution that you personally don't believe in. Because if you were sitting in the shoes of the person who's hiring you and they make a decision that you don't necessarily agree with, you have to be able to say, my viewpoint's a little different than where they sit. They know things and see things differently. I've represented my case. They still chose a different path. I'm going to respect it and do the best I can to implement that solution. Be a politically savvy communicator, able to work down, sideways, laterally, with ease. Free from gossip, politics, bring no drama. That's a big one, no drama. And have a professional style, communication, and teamwork. How'd I do? Okay. So questions to ask yourself. What do you love about what you do? What do you really like to do? Day in, day out, if you could pick something, what would it be? Do you like to manage people who do the work, or do I like to actually get my fingers dirty and do the work? Where do you get your professional joy from? Do I like to build a team and mentor, help grow? Will I be upset? Can I implement a solution I don't believe in? So converting your resume, I gave an example here of what we call the Kiat profile. We put a summary page on the top of a resume and highlight. Every one of our clients is accustomed to seeing a Kiat profile. It's always organized in the same way with the same components. We'll do a summary. Here's how to think of this person. We'll put related experience. We'll put 2 or 3 projects that are similar to what they're considering this person doing, so a client can see why we see this person as a fit for that particular opportunity. And then we'll highlight for our client, here's the roles this person has played. Here's the tools and applications that they're familiar with. Here's their industry experience. We'll put their education down. If they've got their PMP, we'll add it. If they have other certifications that are relevant for that assignment, we'll add those. And then we'll do areas of expertise, and we'll try to highlight for our client things that they're looking for in this particular role, and we'll add those there. We'll go through the rest of the resume. We'll look for poor grammar. We'll look for outcomes, dollars, team sizes. A lot of times resumes are written to talk about the responsibility that you had, but not necessarily the project goal or the outcome. It's written about a role in total, not the work that was accomplished in that role. We'll make some changes there. Then I'd encourage you to sit down with somebody and have them mock interview you. At the end of the day, what you need to ask yourself is, if you were hiring a consultant, would you hire you? And what about you would you not hire? And think about those particular answers that you just gave or the examples that you gave. Are those things that you could change? And factor that into your practice interview next time. Any questions? You guys are easy. Okay, determining your value. Factors that will go into your pay rate. A consulting firm's negotiated rates. In many cases, consulting firms have very little flexibility in what rate they can offer a consultant at based on the negotiated rates they have with that firm's procurement organization. So it may be that where you are specifically may not fit into that role. That really depends on your flexibility. A competitive rate for similar roles. Sometimes we might think our value is $150 an hour, but competitively, that particular skill set is an $85 an hour bill rate. It's important to know that the bill and pay rates are based on a role, not necessarily your cumulative experience. A client's budget. There's different models we have to work in. A markup role is where a client will dictate to us what our profit margin is. That's really challenging for people in our business because every firm has a different set of operational back office costs, but some firms like to control that. And then margin models. The profit margin at an Accenture is much larger than a profit margin at Kiat because an Accenture has a huge back office and research components and all kinds of operational cost and management features that a small boutique firm like a Kiat doesn't have. So consequently, our rates are considerably lower than an Accenture, but the value proposition is totally different between the two firms. Your reputation as a consultant, as you pursue consulting and you have several engagements under your belt, several successful engagements under your belt, your rate and reputation increases. And then how the project is, sorry, I have a typo, how the project is capitalized. Certain projects can be put into the firm's P&L as a capital expense, which then changes, in some cases, how they are willing to pay for that role. Factors that go into your billable rate. Again, competition, client's budget, what they have to spend. Usually clients want somebody that has experience of 20 years experience and they want to pay a 10-year experience rate. That's usually where our negotiation starts. Rate cards are usually established by VMS or procurement organizations, and they typically have nothing to do with the person that you're going to be selling the role to. So the people that are buying our consulting services have no idea that we negotiated a 3% volume discount because they never see that 3%. They get the full hit on their budget. Procurement gets the 3% budget, and that's how they fund their organization. Your track record and references. Other consultant rates for similar roles. Do any of you use a vendor-managed group in your organization? Be like, who is it? Is there a third party or is it? It's you, okay. There are some third-party organizations like a Beeline or Pontoon. There are third-party organizations that create a vendor management program that kind of become, the idea is that it creates a level playing field, that every consulting firm can develop a consulting relationship with that vendor managed program, and then all the buyers inside the company can call the vendor manager program and say, I need a PM. And then 25 firms will send in their best PM, and the vendor manager will choose who the best are and then send them to the buyer. The reality is that typically doesn't work, and the buyers all go underground and meet with their people that they can get the best results from, and then do the deal and then have it go through a VMS. So really what's typical now is a hybrid solution where the VMS program manages all the contracts, the fees, the billing, et cetera. But the consulting firms and the client buyers work together to find what they need. Find somebody that'll fit the culture. Yeah?
VMS stands for?
Vendor Managed System. It's a procurement term that will typically drive consistent rates. So what happens in companies that don't have a vendor managed system is manager A over here has a relationship with consulting firm A, and they get a project manager for $125 an hour. And manager B over here has a relationship with a consulting firm, and they get project managers for $95 an hour. And they meet in the middle, and the two project managers work on a similar project, and they have similar skills. The reason for a VMS is to say, let's capture that savings across the whole company, and let's say that we're going to do project managers at $103 consistently. So in a large company that brings a lot of external talent in, it's a way to capture savings and to make sure that you're not paying too much on one side or not enough on the other. Other things that factor into your billable rate are as I mentioned, the operational load, or what kinds of benefits a firm's going to offer you if they have a research analytics group, what else goes into the operational load of that company, and then the consulting firm's desired profit margin. That's typically a cash flow driver for companies, and for a small firm, and cash flow is king. It's in a boutique firm like ours, regular cash flow is critical to our ability to survive. We're very open with our financials, and all of our clients and consultants can look exactly at what we're doing because of that. So how do the fees break out? Typically on the right, the consultant pay is the majority of the bill rate in our business. This is different from an Accenture or an Ernst & Young. This is in our world. We typically will look for a profit margin of between 25 and 30%. That's what we shoot for. That helps us manage all of our back office costs. It's completely okay for you as a consultant to ask your firm that you're looking at, how do the fees break out? Sometimes people will ask, what percentage of the bill rate do I get? And you can certainly try to negotiate that. You'll find out pretty quickly if that's a negotiable item at your firm. But I don't mind that question. I'm happy to show people how our business breaks out. Ways to figure out what if you were to take your comp package right now and find out what your consulting hourly equivalent is, I would tell you to look at your biweekly or monthly paycheck, however you're paid. Add any bonus or performance-based pay in, so you know what your total dollar money in your pocket is. Add 401k, profit sharing, match dollars, stock options, what other defined benefit programs you have. Are there any reimbursed training, subsidized education, anything like that? Add it all together, come up with your number. And if you divide that number by 2,080, that's really how much money you make every hour in a year. If you want to figure out how that translates into a rate for consulting or for an hourly based, you can take that total number and divide it by the amount of billable time. We usually use the number 1,800, which takes your 2,080, which is the number of workable hours in a year, and subtracts out your PTO hours. And we'll say, okay, well, on average, most people will bill about 1,800 hours a year. So I'll take that same number and spread it across the hours you can recoup with a billable rate. That'll give you an idea. Yeah.
I don't know what PTO was.
Paid time off. That's because you're Canadian. Yes?
I always thought it was personal.
Paid time off. Typically, PTO is a paid benefit. It's time off that the company's paying you for where you're not. Yeah.
Not parent-teacher organization.
Oh, good point. Coming from the educational group, parent-teacher. PTO, all right. Fair point.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
is your last slide supposed to be total hours minus PTO?
Yes. Total hours. So usually we'll use 1,800. That's a safe number. For somebody who's looking to maybe work 6 months and take 6 months off, they're going to use 1,000. Right? Any other questions? In Kiat, we use a load factor, an operational load factor of 20%. So if your number comes out to $52 an hour, we're going to load it with about $11. That's what we use to cover health benefits, 401k, our match, payroll benefits, the insurance that we pay. We have to, as a consulting firm, buy a tremendous amount of liability insurance in case one of our consultants goes on TV and says something about one of our clients and we get sued. We have insurance. We're required to carry a lot of insurance for that. We have workers' comp insurance. We have to carry auto insurance on every one of our consultants. Still not sure why. I'm sure there's some lawsuit somewhere that caused that. For us? Or the load? That's a great question. No. Yes. He asked me if we add the 20% load to an independent consultant. Was that your question? Right. Yeah. And no, we don't. Okay. Yeah. An operator, usually we'll look at, if I use my $52 example, for a W-2 employed consultant, we'd add a 20% operational load to that, so we'd end up about 63, and that'd be about equivalent to an independent contractor. So we would probably offer an independent $62. We usually give a $1 load just to cover cost of paychecks and payroll and a little bit of help in our back office financing. That's a great question. Thank you for the clarification. Any other questions about value? I'm happy to do the math if anybody wants to do that. Okay. Planning for success, ways to network. Meet with other consultants. Surely everybody knows somebody who's in consultant. Ask them who they like to work through. Do they have recruiters they really like? Do they have salespeople they like? Do they have firms that they respond to that they think give them good, interesting assignments? Find out who treats their consultants really well. That's important. Who pays on time? This isn't so much of an issue now as it was back in the 2008 in the financial meltdown. There were companies that couldn't make payroll, and that became a huge issue for people signing on with really small firms. Who gets what I do? So who understands project management? Who can sell it? Who can sell my unique skill set? Who gets why I'm good at what I do? Which companies specialize in what I do, in project management or in business analysis or data analytics or whatever your particular specialty is. And then share your plans with your friends and colleagues as is appropriate. Get the word out that you're looking for, open to new opportunities. If you're comfortable doing so, put onto LinkedIn that you're looking for opportunities. You're exploring new options. Recruiters will go to LinkedIn and search on words like opportunity, seeking, looking for, to find your name in your resume. Change your LinkedIn profile. Every time you change your profile, it sends a notification to everybody in your network that you're looking for something new, that you are exploring new options. Post your resume on Indeed.com. It's a great place to put your credentials. Post your resume on Dice.com, especially if you're looking for a technical PM position. A lot of recruiters will search those sites. Other sites you can post your information on, Monster Career Builder. There are specific places within LinkedIn that you can post your resume or respond to jobs. Ladders.com is a site that's typically for 6 figures and above. So if the role that you're looking for, especially if you're looking for inside of a consulting firm as a salaried position, Ladders.com is a great place to look. And then be prepared to transition. It's exciting to think about. You can go through all of this work. You can have your rate negotiated. You can go to an interview. And then the client says, I love her. When can we get started? And we'll call the consultant and say, they love you. Why don't you put in your 2 weeks notice and we can get you started on April 1st? And the person panics. I'm not ready. I'm not ready to go. That's so important. It happens to us. It happened twice last week. If you heard about Target, laid off 1,200 people in the Minneapolis market. And we had a flood of people looking for new roles. And we worked like crazy to find several of these people new positions. And when they got the offer, a couple of them sat back and said, I'm not ready. The bad part about that is we have really major egg on our face. And we work so hard for those people. I understand they're in the middle of a career crisis, but it's really important to ask yourself, if you get a yes, are you ready? Are you ready to jump? Because somebody's putting the relationship with their client out there for you. Make sure you're ready for that. Would you be prepared to start Monday? Sometimes we'll have people come back and say, well, I didn't think it'd go that fast. I thought it'd be like September or later in the year. So, ask that question and be prepared. If you get an offer, are you ready to go? You ready to clean out your desk and get started on the next phase of your career? Be prepared for a background check. There's no client we work with that doesn't do a background check, and many do drug tests. There are clients, especially in the financial services realm, that if you have a felony conviction in some sort of a dishonest or fraud-related activity, even if it was when you were 17, well, not 17, but 18, that you were young, we can't place you there. And it's an agreement that we have with the client. It's their fiduciary responsibility to make sure, and that's how they protect themselves in lawsuit situations, is to make sure they're not introducing people with a history of fraudulent behavior. So if you do have any sort of marks on your background, it's wise to disclose them up front. Otherwise, it could end up with a really embarrassing conversation. Be prepared for a drug check. If you happen to be taking, this is odd, even as an adult, sometimes we need a note from our doctor. There are certain drugs that some of us take that show up on a restricted list. They're typically the kinds of drugs when you go to the doctor that they make you hand carry the prescription to the pharmacy. They can't send it electronically. You may just have to get a note from your physician saying, this isn't approved. It's not a big deal. How many of you had to take a drug test? Yeah, interesting. And then make sure and accept the rate you negotiated. So when you are working with a firm and you negotiate your rate, they're going to take that information and negotiate their rate. So when the deal's all done and you come back and try to renegotiate, it starts your consulting engagement off on a really bad foot. Okay, managing your personal brand. We talked a little bit about this earlier. Set expectations with your firm if what you're trying to do is land your next full-time role. Because firms like Kiat or other firms, if they are in the business of helping other clients find their next leaders, that's a great way to use consulting as a bridge to your next role. By contrast, don't use consulting as a placeholder until you find something. Again, no different than if you guys had hired a consultant and then 3 months into the engagement, they quit, and you're left holding a project in the right past. They've got so much time invested in it, so very important not to use it as a placeholder. Recognize the important role that consultants play. We talked a little bit about variable resource models earlier when we were gathering expectations. Many clients have, most of the models that we work with our clients, when they're budgeting, they'll put a third of their resource budget allocated to utilizing external talent. And inside that third, there's a portion that's for business process outsourcers. There's a portion for verticals like SAP or Oracle. And there's a portion for, I need to expand the bandwidth of my team. I need a PM here, or I need 5 BAs. I know I'm going to need external talent. I don't think I'm going to need them all the time, so I want to use them in a contract basis or in consultant basis. So majority of companies now have that built into their resource model because it gives them flexibility to manage their resource pool up and down as demand dictates. Make sure your reputation is stellar when you leave. In every market, the consulting community is a very small community, and if you leave poorly, I get calls all the time from clients saying, I'm thinking of hiring so-and-so, and I see on their resume they did a gig for you. What'd you think? So it's important that you leave well. Be the consultant that you'd like to hire. Remember that true character is always tested at the worst times in a project. You can stand out in tough projects by keeping the team on track, motivated. It's one of the beauties of being a consultant, is that you typically don't have any baggage, you don't have any ownership at that firm. You have ownership in the outcome of the project. So if you can remain and be the one calm, cool voice of, you know what, guys, it's okay. Take a breath. We're fine. We're going to make it, because everybody else is invested in their company, in their position, in their career. So it's a great place to play as a consultant. And the firm you work for, like I said, can be called on for a reference. You want to make sure your references are always top notch. Okay. Perception of consultants, questions that I would ask as a group of how many of you have worked with consultants and didn't have a great experience? Why?
Basically just not following through. The other big issue was not being willing to tell us bad news or tell us what
Yeah.
we didn't hear.
We call that Minnesota nice. So he said two things. One was not following through on commitments you made, or not being willing to stand up and say bad news. Yeah,
Communication.
communication.
Yeah, I mean, you have a high expectation for, very good communication.
You expected good communication and didn't get it. Yeah. What else has happened in consulting engagements you've worked with? What about really, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, from the mortgage industry standpoint, we had one really high-powered group that came in the McKinsey team. They knew the business through and through. Conversely, with another entity, folks were not in tune with the industry. Questions came up that you would submit never, just got in the way.
Yeah. So then you have a firm that doesn't know your business.
Right.
And do you think they were brought in with the expectation that they did know the business?
Yes. From
Yeah.
the standpoint of LOS.
Yeah. It's interesting to find out, and the reason I asked that is my first project in mortgage, I came out of the health insurance business, and the mortgage business was back before cross-sell became a strategy inside mortgage of, we've got your mortgage business, do we have your banking business, do we have your credit card business, et cetera. And within health insurance, back then, typically, if you were a Blue Cross Blue Shield and your parents were Blue Cross Blue Shield and your grandma was Blue Cross Blue Shield, you were Blue Cross Blue Shield because it's what you grew up with. And insurance companies had amazing retention of their customers, even generational retention. We were brought into a mortgage company and we knew nothing about mortgage. But specifically because we were looking at how did you serve your customers and how could you build some of the retention strategies of a Blue Cross Blue Shield or an insurance into mortgage company so that you wouldn't think of any other company for getting your mortgage served or your banking needs. So it's a great point because finding out why a consultant was brought in might be different, to your point on communication. If we clearly lay out, we're bringing these people in, but here's what we want to get out of it. We're not looking at them to be experts in mortgage. We want to learn what we can learn from them about how they deal with this industry. So excellent point. Any others? Okay, so by conversely, were there consultants you've worked at that you thought were spectacular? And why?
People who were willing to recognize that as a consultant, they were in a unique position to get people to look at things objectively, even if it wasn't what they wanted to hear, and they wanted to stick their neck out and do that.
Yeah.
And that was exactly what we needed, and frankly, it was exactly why we hired them. I needed somebody who didn't have a dog in the hunt, who was willing to look at it objectively and get the rest of us to kind of take our blinders off and see the bigger picture.
Right.
So that's where a consultant can really.
So somebody that can really have you look at a different perspective.
They don't, they're not part of your organization. They're not finding their way up the food chain. They don't have, they're not thinking about the next 20 years at this company. They're thinking about solving the problem.
Right. And they're not thinking about what happened last week, last year, last decade. So they're just presenting a different perspective and challenging the status quo and asking some tough questions. Yeah.
I would say someone who has very little ego and who can communicate cross-functionally and across different teams, different levels. But
I think
heavy
so.
emphasis on low ego.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And there were, the early days of consulting, there was kind of the picture of the 6 people that would come in at 6 and work until midnight, and they all had blue suits on, and they were obnoxious, and they'd sit in the conference room, and they wouldn't talk to anybody, and they just kind of felt like they were smarter than everybody. And the reality is some of us still have that in our mind as when we think about a consulting group coming in, we might have that viewpoint in the back of our mind. And the reason I bring that up is that you kind of need to know how this firm thinks about consultants, or how the person that you're going to be reporting to, how they think about consultants, because you may have a perception to overcome before you even start. And you just need to be aware of that. And you've heard some good things here of behaviors to avoid and behaviors that are outstanding. So think about that as you're crafting your own consulting toolkit of the types of consultant that you want to be. And back to that point of who you'd like to hire. Think about, in the end of the day, what will your personal brand be like? You know, one of my first mentors in consulting, we were around a room, a project had just gone poorly. He was brought in to help us help the company get back on track. I was a green bean studying underneath him. And everybody around the table was pointing fingers. The emotion was high. Everybody was, pointing fingers at the people across the table. It's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault. Here's what happened, diagnosing it. And it was loud voices and pink cheeks and anger and passion and emotion. And he stood up. There was this skinny little guy. Stood up and he slammed his hands on the table. And it kind of startled everybody. And he said, tell you what, I'm the consultant. Let's blame me. It's my fault. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. And it was just, the whole room was just silent. And he said, now that we figured out whose fault it was, let's figure out how to fix it. And it just knocked everybody off there. And then he got down to a solution. And I stood there thinking, it's like one of the best lessons I ever learned in watching him. At some points we just need to say, you know what, that didn't work. And we're going to figure out, we got smart people in the room, let's figure out how to go from here. So any questions? I've given you a quick hour and 10 minutes on consulting as I know it. It's an industry that I love. I started in it 25 years ago, and I remember my dad, who, back to the CIO, he said, well, this is great, honey. You can get a job, you can try a couple different companies, and then find yourself a real job. This is great. And thanks, Dad. Here I am 25 years later, and I love this industry. Yes?
So do we have a problem these days with that come in at 6, go home at midnight type expectation? Or do they truly see consultants as an extension of their own staff, and they're willing to treat them with respect, not burn them out, and so on?
It's a great question. I would tell you the majority of the clients that we work with, budgets have become so tight that we typically are told ahead of time that there's a limitation of 40 hours. Some clients will budget 45 hours. So very rarely do we see the sweatshop. I'm sure there are firms that buy project dollars. I'll pay you $5 million to do this project. And that company will say, I don't care how long it takes, we're going to work around the clock till we get it done. That's not the business we're in. Ours are an extension. We're part of that 30% resource pool. So our people, typically the greatest compliment we get is when our consultant wraps up their engagement, that the people they're working with on the team will say, wow, I didn't know you weren't an employee. I thought you were one of our team. That to us is the greatest compliment you can get. It's a great question to ask as you're considering. Our people are very respected. Yeah, Renee.
I had a question. It's concerning delivering bad news. How do you deliver bad news? I mean, in an employee setting, there's generally not an incentive to deliver bad news.
Yeah.
And then for consultants, maybe it's a little easier, but you sort of have to put it in an ice cream sandwich, or
Well,
how do you do it?
Delivering bad news is always tough. I employ the rip the Band-Aid off approach.
So no ice cream sandwich.
Bad news is bad news. Sugarcoating it doesn't always deliver the message. Sometimes you can wrap bad news in so much sugar-coated messaging that they miss the bad news. I think it's better to be unemotional, as unemotional as you possibly can, and say, here's the situation. Here's our project. Here's the situation. We've made this decision. It was the wrong decision. We're going to be, $500,000 over budget. I want to bring it to your attention now. Most of our clients will say, tell me the truth because I can manage what I know. If I don't know, or if you're going to surprise me or you're going to bury it under a pile and I get hit with it later or at the end when all of a sudden you tell me when I think everything's great that we're over budget, then I can't do anything about it. So I think part of being a good financial steward of your client's resources is you got to tell the truth, even if it's hard.
Sorry, beginning of the day or end of the day? Friday or Monday?
Friday or Monday. Probably depends on the person. I was just asked I was being interviewed by the Business Journal in Minneapolis, and he asked me, what's your best time of your day? And I said, my best time of the day is between 6 and 8 at night. And he said, what's your worst time of day? I said, the same 2 hours in the morning. But that's not true of everybody. There are some clients that would much rather you come in the morning, deliver the news so they can think on it, percolate it through the day, and have a solution ready the next morning. Other people would rather hear it at the end. I think you have to know your client. Good question. Yes?
Julia, can I just give you the mic? I'm moving as fast as I can.
This goes back to the resume, redoing your resume so it's more productized, which is great input. So the company, I realize this may not be true for anybody else here, the company that I come from, that I've worked at for many, many years, they're a private company. Our projects are handed down to us from management, and they're also stopped by management, right? We don't have access to how much a project costs. They don't run their business that way. So if I were to go make my resume like that, I would be not only missing certain points, but it could look derogatory on me because the reasons why projects are ended or, don't quite get out the way they're supposed to, that's not 9.9 times out of 10, it's not project management. It's because leadership changed their mind, technology, we couldn't master it to get it done. And so how do you try to get past that so it doesn't look so bad?
That's a good question. Did everybody hear the
Thanks, Julia.
question is really how do you represent projects on your consulting resume where you maybe don't know the project dollars or the projects were fixed before you could list an outcome. So how I would do it, what firms want to know or what other clients want to know is how big was the effort? Was it this big or was it this big? So that you can define. I had 25 people on my team. I was in 4 locations. You can say, here was the goal of the project. And in the end, you can say, ultimately, our work led our clients to make a decision to stop the project. That's an outcome in itself. That means that you presented enough information to your management team that they were able to make a business decision. Whether or not you had input to that business decision is immaterial because in a project management role, typically your job is to be the facilitator of that project work and to deliver business decisions or enough fuel that your company can make decisions. So I would outline it exactly as that. People will represent themselves as being, and I've had a 20-year career in project management. When you start asking them questions, the biggest team they've ever managed is 2 people, themselves and one other. Well, if a company's looking for someone to manage a team in 3 locations and an outsourced vendor in India, and they expect it to have 100 people on the team, that's also a project manager. They just need to know, are we talking about a bread box or an RV? So use whatever words you need to do to say which one did you manage. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll bring the mic over to you. Thanks.
Thank you for your presentation today. It was really nice. So my case is I've been working with telecom engineering for 7 years, and I've been taking technical roles. And I was always part of project that I don't know the money involved in that. If you want to say it in project management, I was part of the execution, not of the planning or not of the initiation, and probably in the closing phase where we hand over to the customer or to some other department. I am considering project management. I am preparing for my PMP, and the fact that all what I did was technical, never in the managerial. I was probably team lead for some time, but not managing. Am I gonna consider myself as a junior in PMP and just flash the 7 years? As you said, we have some bruises. I do have some bruises. I've been working in more than 7 countries, not only in the US. I've just came to the US 3 years ago. So I have bruises from telecom engineering, but not from PM life or career. So how do I consider myself as a value for PM role?
That's a great question. So how does she, what was your name again? Tamra? So Tamra's question was, how do I represent my experience when it might not be as the project manager role, but that I played valuable roles on a project team for a number of years. And it sounds like you've got some great international experience. I assume, are you fluent in different languages? Yes. Yes, so. French, English, and Arabic. Yes, okay, so that'd be a big one. The way that I would represent that is a project professional or practitioner. Served roles, a technical lead position on projects doing XYZ. I'm fluent in these 3 languages. I work on project teams that are this size. I wouldn't represent yourself as a project manager until you've actually played the role of a project manager, but that doesn't necessarily mean you'd have to pitch yourself as a junior, because your experience could be on a project team in a more senior role. However, wherever you're working right now, I would put that in your development plan, because typically you can't get a PMP awarded until you have specific hours as a project manager. So get some experience as a project manager in your current role or your current company so that you can bill yourself as the project manager. Does that make sense? So the words I see a lot are project practitioner or a technical lead on a project. You can still put the demographics of the project. 45 people, 3 countries, my role, and you can specifically lay out your particular role. Companies may want to bring someone with your skill set in to be almost like a deputy project manager on projects where there's a strong international component. Huge skill. I wouldn't in any way discount that.
We got time for one more question. I'll pass it over to you here.
In this day and age with the different methodologies, is it pretty much a given that, for example, most project managers that are independent contractor or whatnot, or W-2, do you expect them to be as equally versed in Agile as Waterfall, for example?
Great question. So do I expect most project managers to be versed in all methodologies? You specifically mentioned Waterfall, Agile. No. I don't typically see that. I'll see people that'll be practitioners in one or the other. The smart consultant looks at them as all tools on your tool belt. That there are certain clients that all they want to hear is that you're bringing a Scrum Master to the table. And there are others that don't want to talk to anybody unless they're PMP. Then there's somebody else that doesn't want anybody except somebody who's had change management experience. When you can pull that out of your tool belt and change your resume, I've done change management, or I've been a Scrum Master, I can run sprints, I've managed a project in an Agile environment, I've done mock Agile, I've used the lingo but not the methodology. I think the important part of the artistry of project management is being able to go in, assess a situation, look at the team, the maturity of the project environment, the project processes inside your client, and then look at your tool belt and say, I'm going to use a hammer and a screwdriver and my small pliers. And that's what I'm going to use on this one. So, does that answer your question?
Do you usually have that flexibility or leverage with the IT team to make those calls as opposed to your contractor?
Usually we'll know ahead of time. If an IT team is specifically looking for an Agile practitioner, you'll get the role because you've got that experience. But over the years, we've been through it all. I only want to talk to people that have rational. I want somebody that knows extreme programming. I only want a PMP. I don't want a PMP. It'll go both ways. I don't want that person because they just push methodology, and it typically has to do with what's the experience been the last 3 or 4 projects. So I think the more flexible as you prepare yourself for potentially for consulting, or if you just want to be ready to be reactive if something happens to the position that you're in right now, the more tools you have on your tool belt, the better off you are. Great question.
Laura, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
We have a little gifty here for you. Thank you very much for sharing the secret sauce of consulting. Did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And thank you all very much for participating tonight. Great.